Welcome to Warhammer General Tactics. In this video, we're taking a look at a Seraphon army list.
General Tactics.
I want to do something a little different this time. This is something that was suggested a few times and sounded fun, so let's try a list review. I'm an avid Seraphon player, so naturally I'd start here. The list is what I consider a pretty basic but effective Seraphon army. Unsurprisingly, it centers around a Slann Master, summoning new models. So the list is a Slann Master as the general, a Saurus Astaroth Bearer, Skink Star Priest, and 2 Skink Priests as the other leader models. For battle line, I included the bare minimum, 3 units of 10 Skinks. In the artillery spot, I added 3 units of 4 Razordons, and for behemoths, there are 2 Bastiladons with solar engines. To round out the last few points, I added the 2 endless spells, Chronomatic Cogs, and the Balewind Vortex. The premise is pretty simple: summon and shoot. The Slann Master has the Great Remember command trait and Incandescent Rectrices artifact. Great Remember is an awesome ability that gives you another chance to use Lords of Space and Time. This can be used to teleport a second unit, or even try again on a unit that failed their Lord's result roll. By the way, Lords will be your best friend in this army, and as a Seraphon player in general. From a bird's eye point of view, there will be 3 main aspects of this army: the firing base, the Skinks, and the Slann. When the firing base is compromised, the Slann can use Lords of Space and Time to move to another part of the board and start a new firing base with their summoning points. Use subsequent Lords of Space and Time to potentially move Skink characters to safety as well, but this depends on how decimated the Razordons and Bastiladon have been. Depending on how late in the game the Slann is moving, the Skink characters may be best served keeping the Razordons and Bastiladon alive with Celestial Rites and Summon Starlight. But before all this, we have to think about deployment. Generally, you'll be serving up a line of Skinks in the front to screen your Slann and range units from combat. If you can keep the Astaroth Bearer alive, you will likely want to deploy the Slann as far back as possible. Most opponents really won't have more firepower than this force, so most enemies will have to come to you, meaning you can sit your models pretty far back. The army is 13 drops, which is relatively high. So unfortunately, the Seraphon player will rarely be determining who gets to go first, so definitely take that into consideration. This means that many opponents will be trying to get the double turn on you, or they will go for the Alpha Strike. Many players won't be too keen on giving Seraphon players first because it means additional time gathering conjuration points, and with this army, it means being shot at. An alternate deployment would have the Skink specifically on objectives and all the shooting units surround the support characters, maybe against a board edge. Depending on the opponent and the mission, you may just want to use the firing base to screen for the Slann as the Skinks go grab objectives. The enemy will be pressed to deal with the firing base, and will be so busy taking out your offensive units that they may let the Skinks sneak by. Other than keeping the Slann back and screened, your support characters will need to be in all the right places. The Astaroth Bearer is better off stationed away from the Slann. Getting additional space you can summon will be very helpful with this army, and keeping the Astaroth away from the Slann increases the space you can potentially deploy conjured units. The Skink Priest will double up to ensure both Bastiladon and the Razordon units get their reroll save prayer. Don't rely on one 4-up to get this buff going, hence why I almost always throw in 2 of these fellows. Celestial Rites will keep their firing base alive much longer with their all-around 4-up rerollable saves. I didn't mention it before, but I always equip priests with priestly trappings to give their buff an aura effect. Moving on to the Skink Star Priest, this one can go at arm's length to the rest of the army if need be. The little guy is really only there to hit units with the -1 to hit debuff spell, Summon Starlight. In a battle that will see the Slann shot at a lot, I'd direct Summon Starlight at our big toad. The other great part about the Star Priest is that it can be used to cast the Chronomatic Cogs for the Slann. The cogs are just used by a wizard, not necessarily the one who casted them. After deployment, let's talk about the strategy and tactics used with this force of lizardmen. Breaking our three aspects down into more detail, we'll start with the Slann Master. As long as the Slann is still kicking, the army can keep functioning, so don't be afraid to use Lords of Space and Time on the Slann to send him to a safe board edge, leaving all the other lizards to fend for themselves. The Slann is absolutely the most important part to this army, and allows the Seraphon player to potentially come back from utter defeat. The Slann comes with two magical assistants, the Endless Spells. First turn, cast those Endless Spells and get the Slann a couple extra casting attempts. I tend to dump all these spells into conjuration points, but if I were fighting a Chaos Demon player, I'd maybe spend one turn to cast Light of the Heavens, hopefully putting a huge damper on those nasty demon icons. You know, the ones that summon more models on a battle shock roll of 1. Anyway, first turn, assuming both spells go off, you'll be generating between 14 and 16 conjuration points. I get these numbers by saying the Slann will be getting 5 casting attempts. One will be spent summoning this Balewind Vortex, so 12 CP, along with 1 for the army and D3 for the Astrolith Bearer. As mentioned before, the Star Priest is summoning the Chronomatic Cogs, so the Slann doesn't have to waste a cast. I usually don't spend any conjuration points on anything first turn to both stock up for later and because there usually isn't much for the models to do first game round. If your opponent is super aggressive and is in your face top of turn 1, then maybe some Razordons or Salamanders for a little close range fire. If all goes according to plan, you should be able to summon a Bastiladon in the second turn, and then another one on the third turn. Or you could maybe just be spamming Razordons, but you'll be hard pressed for space under the Astrolith Bearer's reroll to hit umbrella. And all this sounds great and flashy, but don't forget the humble Skink unit when summoning. Sometimes the extra screen or objective grabber will be more important than a bit of extra shooting. Note that if one or both of the Endless Spells failed, you may be behind a few conjuration points, but you should definitely have the points for a Bastiladon by third turn. The Slann has a few more uses, and I'd recommend checking out the War Scroll view on the channel for more details on them. With our Endless Spells factored in, our Toad has a 3-up rerollable save with 7 wounds and is -1 to hit with Lookout Sir. The -1 to hit can be pumped up to -2 with the Skink Star Priest. Definitely a good plan when facing a heavy shooting army. All this is not bad, but will not keep it from dying. Incandescent Rectrices can, well, it can once. This is an awesome magic item that will hopefully keep the Slann alive with D6 wounds. I've said it before, but Lords of Space and Time will also become pivotal to keeping the Slann alive. At least until an FAQ, even atop the Balewind Vortex, Lords of Space and Time will move our big Toad. Next to mention is the Slann's Celestial Configuration ability. All of these results will come in handy. +1 to cast is good to get those Endless Spells up more reliably. Reroll 1s to hit will help if you lose the Astrolith Bearer, or if a shooting unit needs to move out from under its aura. But don't forget the result that adds +1 to run and charge. If we did roll this result, we could potentially tune up the cogs to allow Seraphon units to charge +3 inches. On the surface, our army isn't much for charging, but factoring in the list of units summonable by Celestial Configuration, the synergies start coming out. When summoning, units have to be at least 9 inches away, but this additional movement will make the roll needed to charge just a 6. If you summoned in a leader model, or a model close enough to a leader model, they can reroll their charge roll with forward to victory. This might be a time for Saurus Warriors, Kroxigor, or even Ripperdactyls. I've also mentioned it before, but Troglodons could get some incredible range if they shoot their target before charging in with these buffs. If it scored a wound, it would be charging 2d6 plus 6 inches. This gives an average charge of 13 inches. Realistically, often just more shooty dinos will be a better option, but maybe you just want to lock up a unit in which these little shenanigans may pay off. The Slann's command ability is also a neat ability, but you're already rerolling saves due to the Skink Priests. What it is good for is giving your big cumbersome firing base the fly ability. Being so tightly packed in due to the Astaroth Bear and Priest auras means the Razordons and Bastiladons are tripping all over each other. Giving them flies sometimes will mean they can maneuver just right to get the perfect shot. The second component I mentioned that we will talk about are the Skinks. These guys will actually be the workhorses a lot of times. These models will be grabbing objectives and dancing around the opponent as they try to catch them. Another unit that has a war scroll view for your viewing pleasure. Weary Fighters is really one of the best rules in the game, and you'll have to make smart use of it with only 3 lightly armored units moving out to grab objectives. None of our units are really combat fighters, so a lot of the time, if you have to choose between retreating with the Skinks and attacking with Bastiladon or Razordon, I choose to escape with Skinks. This also goes for my combat phase. Sometimes I may charge in with Skinks just to retreat using Weary Fighters. It's extremely frustrating to the opponent, and that extra movement can be used to move closer to the objectives or to lead the attacker away from the main force. Move the Skinks 8 inches, charge 2d6, which is obviously an average of 7, and the Weary Fighters moves another 8, for a grand total of 23 inches. Sometimes I will run my Skinks right in front of the opponent's army just to be charged. Before the opponent activates, or as long as the Skinks survive the first swing, I use Weary Fighters to retreat and move further down the field. Lords of Space and Time will also prove invaluable at keeping your little lizardmen alive and harassing the opponent's objectives. Between Weary Fighters and Lords, the 3 Skink units should feel like they are covering the whole table. Don't always feel obliged to summon more Razordons or Bastiladons. Sometimes, more Skinks to grab objectives will be more valuable. The third and final component to the list is the firing base. This includes the Bastiladons and Razordons, but also the Skink heroes and Astaroth Bear. In the end, the support characters are there to enhance the shooting units, so they too get included in this component. With the Skink Priests, the units will actually be pretty durable. Razordon's 4-up save and Bastiladon's 3-up save that ignores Ren will hold up quite well with rerolls from Celestial Rites. Also, don't forget the Skink Star Priest summons Starlight on one of the Seraphon units, but this is probably better to cast on an enemy unit, as we will have quite a few options for the opponent to pick from in most cases. As stated, this -1 is also handy for the Slann to give it a total of -2 to hit with Lookout Sir. Moving on to the Saurus Astaroth Bear's benefit, it's obvious, and it makes all of our shooting more accurate. Just about everything hits on 4s, so this would make it 25% more accurate to be exact. If this fella dies, it likely won't be worth replacing it with Conjuration points. If the Slann doesn't have the reroll ones to hit Constellation up, just summon in a Skink Handler unit to keep near the Razordons. The fire base is often going to take the main attention of the opponent, but will likely be the least important to actually winning your games. That is for the Skinks and the Slann. Stick the firing base somewhere impossible to maneuver around, like between 2 objectives or near the middle of the board. Since it is so many units at variable speeds, it is actually fairly cumbersome to move, so positioning is pretty important. The Bastiladons can obviously take a hit better than the Razordons, but they won't always be able to protect their smaller siblings. Since the Razordons have a shorter range, they will likely go in front of the Bastiladon. But with this said, remember that if the Razordons are charged, they may be able to stand and shoot. When playing this army, you'll quickly notice that command points are pretty unimportant. The Slann command ability and Forward to Victory are great, but already covered by the Skink Priest Celestial Rites. In the same vein, Seraphon Bravery 10 makes Insane Bravery pretty unimportant, especially for such small units. This leaves all your command points basically for at the double. Mostly this will just be used to ensure the Skink characters scatter like roaches when the firing base gets disturbed, but can come in handy when grabbing objectives too. Remember, all our Skink units will be moving 14 inches with this ability. Not sure that I'll actually make changes, but I would like to talk about things that could potentially be changed about the list. If I were to tweak the list, I'd think about taking out a shooting unit for more Skinks or a Salamander and Handler pair. Salamanders are nice, but need a unit of Skink handlers with them. They can actually be summoned in at any point, and don't totally overlook them, but Razordons just seem a bit more versatile and have a slight statistical advantage. Also, I guess the Skink characters aren't entirely necessary, but I definitely like having them around. Each one just means 2 more Razordons, but I like having a bit more variety that they add. As far as weaknesses, like many Age of Sigmar armies, it does have a few counters. Games against armies that can deal mortal wounds at a range to our Slann will be extremely tough. Once the Slann is dead and incandescent rectrices doesn't save them, the army crumbles. Keeping the model out of combat shouldn't be too difficult with all the Skinks and shooting units to screen it. Incoming shooting can be mitigated by rerollable armor save and -1 or 2 to hit, but mortal wounds will go right through our frog friend. Also, be leery of armies that can move as fast as us. If the Slann can't get away and get a turn or 2 to build back its defenses, Lords of Space and Time won't do any good. I really am excited to share a Seraphon list with you guys. I don't get to play a whole lot of Age of Sigmar tournaments, so this list isn't as playtested as I'd like, but it has been fairly successful and fun. I'd really like to hear what you all think of the list as well. And like I said, this is the first full list review I've done, so let me know how you liked it and where I can improve. I really appreciate all feedback, and it can only make the videos better. I think it might also be cool to review some of your lists, so let me know if that sounds interesting. As stated before, I have plenty of other Seraphon content and AOS in general on the channel. Check out the Seraphon playlist for warscroll views and tactical summaries of things like summoning and Lords of Space and Time. And, as always, thanks for watching.